Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Construction Worker Podcast. I'm digital media editor Warren Frey, and with me today I have
Sebastien Gendron, CEO and co-founder of TransPod.
And Sebastien, let's go into, not everybody, I wrote an article last year about this, but I'm sure not everybody knows what TransPod is. So let's explain what TransPod is in the first place before we go into details on what you're doing.
So TransPod is a Canadian-based company. We are headquarters are in Ontario, and our primary business is to develop a new mode of transportation. We're following a concept which have been around for many years. Initial design are from the started beginning of the last century, and we're talking about tube transportation. And more recently, Musk kind of popularized the idea and called it Hyperloop, even if we want to kind of move away slightly from that. But that's this is what we're doing, like developing the vehicle as well as infrastructure projects to be able to connect major cities worldwide.
And let's start with something you just introduced, I think, this month called Flux Jet. Can you explain what that is and what it does, and if there are actually any jets involved?
So Flux Jet is the name of our vehicle, like the transport vehicle. So the one which is going to be used in the infrastructure to connect cities. And the project we have recently is the main one. The first one is to connect Calgary to Edmonton in Alberta. And so the Flux Jet is an aircraft without wings, the size of a train coach. Or a bus where we can, I would say, use to transport people or and goods.
And from what I can tell on your website, in the first place, if you look on the interior, it doesn't look a lot different than sort of a higher end train system in terms of passenger experience. And also, apparently, it goes like 1,000 miles an hour, or is it 1,000 kilometers an hour, which would mean, well, you tell me, but I think it's something like a half hour from one place to the next, from Edmonton to Calgary, for instance.
Yeah, we're talking about 1,000 kilometers per hour, not miles yet. And to go back to your point on the passenger experience, it's closer to the passenger experience we have on an aircraft than a train. Since we're dealing with smaller vehicles, like again the size of a train or a train coach or a bus, we'll have different configuration from economy class, business class, why not first class, or even same configuration as what we could what we can see on the subway. And about the speed as well, when we mention 1,000 kilometers per hour, it's the top speed. So it's not like you got shot like a magnetic gun. It's a transportation system, so the acceleration is similar to the one we have on an aircraft at takeoff, or even smaller than that, similar to what we have on the subway. So to connect Calgary to Edmonton, we're looking at average speed between 600 to 700 kilometers per hour. And the time to do the trip would be around 40 minutes.
Okay, and what's the science behind not Hyperloop, but let's say science behind TransPod and design systems of its ilk? Like I get the idea, it's like a pneumatic tube from the 1800s, but I think that's a radical oversimplification that we were given in the first place. So maybe you could explain exactly how the science works without going too past the layman.
No, I'll try to stay high level. First of all, we need to differentiate what you just said about pneumatic tubes and so on. We're not using that kind of approach. It's a magnetic type system, and the concept which have been around for many years, it's fairly simple. It's just some people kind of had the ideas that if we remove most of the air in a tube, you allow the vehicle to have friction with the ambient air, and by avoiding friction, you can, in theory, achieve speeds which are similar to an aircraft. And so that's kind of basically what we kind of started to do now, 7 years ago? Yeah, and the company has been created in 2015. And having said that, Then there's a good ecosystem now. There's 6 to 8 players worldwide trying to develop this tech. And to make it work, the devil is in the details. So you need to make sure that you can address the levitation, the propulsion, and the power transmission. And this is what we've been kind of doing at TransPod, and this is what we unveiled last week to explain with the first functional prototype. And there's actually even more media content which is going to come out in the next few days, really for people to see how the levitation works, how the propulsion works, how do we transmit power on a continuous basis. And there's one trick as well, is that if you don't want to reinvent the wheel, some of our competitors kind of, okay, let's try to use maglev, which is kind of the known magnetic kind of system out there right now. There's one commercial line, I think it's to connect the Shanghai airport. But maglev as a major issue is way too expensive. And so what we did at TransPod is that it's too expensive because the tech is being split between the infrastructure and the vehicle. The challenge is that the infrastructure is hundreds of kilometers. So then the cost is jumping to the roof. And what we did is that it's still magnetic, but on the vehicle. So we kept all the tech to keep the infrastructure cost as low as possible. And then we kind of developed our own IP and demonstrated that last week on that first functional vehicle.
Right. Okay. And you mentioned Edmonton to Calgary, and that's kind of, I think that's your first proposed system. How is that coming along at this point?
Pretty good. I'm actually in Alberta right now, and the 2 cities are on board. The government is, as of today, on board. So we kind of kicked off the work to allow the construction to happen next year. So the initial work we're doing right now is going through the environmental impact assessment and all the admin work, the permitting. We've discussed about the construction permit with the city of Edmonton yesterday. So they explained us the process to move forward. We did a site tour with our investors so they can see where the line will be located. So as of today, we are in we have to narrow down quite precisely where that initial phase, so the test track, will be located, and how we can connect it to Edmonton downtown and Edmonton International Airport. So that's kind of the work we're doing. We have 6 to 8 months of work, like until spring next year, to kind of finalize all of that, with the objective to kick off construction second half of 2023.
I know there's been talk of a high-speed rail network in Alberta as well, and so that's not your problem really. But what I want to know is, besides the obvious one, which is speed, what are the advantages of this system over a high-speed rail system?
Yeah, so as many Albertans might know, we've seen many feasibility studies about an high-speed train between the 2 cities. And it's kind of similar to some corridors we've seen in France, where where the profitability is not there. Like in France, and that was political decision, but 80% of high-speed train lines in France are not profitable. And we knew that when we started TransPod a few years ago, and we said, okay, how can we improve the business case? And to improve the business case, we must utilize the infrastructure way more than it is right now. And in order to do that, it's to mix passenger and freight. And main drawback of any high-speed rail initiative today in Alberta or in France or elsewhere is that you can't mix with freight, so you don't have that extra amount of revenue. And so to make it work, you need public money. And they may succeed to get some money from the government, but from what I know, it's not kind of the trend. They they're not in favor of doing it. So this is where, with the business model we're proposing, the infrastructure is 100% financed by the private sector. We're not looking at taxpayer money, and that's the main difference.
And you mentioned cargo, which we hadn't gotten into yet. How does is it just a matter of hollowing the TransPod out and putting cargo in it, or is there more you have to answer to in order to send cargo instead of people?
Yeah, so since we're dealing with smaller vehicles, we can the trick here is to be able to interline both freight and passenger vehicle in the tube. So it's like being on an highway where you have both passenger cars and trucks, I would say, transporting goods. And the FluxJet vehicle can accommodate both passengers and freight. So when you'll be traveling in the transport line, you can definitely, you might have actually a freight vehicle in front of you or behind you, or anyway, or both. And this is how we maximize the business case of the infrastructure.
Okay, and finally, you said there's more announcements coming. Where should people go to find out more about TransPod and what you have coming up?
I mean, we'll share that on social media, definitely, and yeah, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. We'll share upcoming videos. We're planning to do a mini series of videos to explain every subsystem, yeah, one by one, and go into the details. I think this is something which have been missing from the ecosystem, like Hyperloop or tube transportation ecosystem, and we want to get away from that hype, and be able to kind of, okay, this is how it works. And if there is some criticism or arguments about the tech, we'll be happy to answer them, or even maybe there's some flaws we didn't see, and we'll do everything to address them. But we're pretty confident so far. So that's what we're planning to do.
Okay, great. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.